Hi, I'm Georgette Pierre, and you're listening to Black and Nuanced Podcast, dispelling the idea that Black people are monolithic. Woo-wee! It was all good just a week ago. Actually, it all started with unemployment and for the third time in New York City. They tell you third time's a charm, but fuck that shit. The first time, I hit rock bottom. I was no longer able to afford my 100 square foot studio room with shared bathrooms in the hallway on the Upper West Side. I fell 4 months behind on rent and was giving them peanuts from the peanuts I was getting from unemployment to pay down the debt I owed. I made an agreement with my landlord and moved out without having to owe anything, and then slept on a friend's couch in Union Square from October 2013 to February 2014. I left Valentine's Day to be exact. During that time on my friend's couch, I went back to working in retail when Piper Lime, a Gap Inc. company, used to exist in the streets of Soho, New York. Oh, and I was also living out of my storage unit, swapping out clothes for work in the wintertime. The second time I became unemployed was during the Ponderosa, aka the pandemic. I was 6 years removed from hitting my version of rock bottom, and New York wasn't a safe place to be during the pandemic. So I quit the board operator job that I spoke about in episode 4 with Lenny Green, went to my mom's house in Northern Virginia, and stayed there for 4 months. My body was in complete duress, but I felt all right financially. I was living in a rent-stabilized studio apartment on West 146th Street, where the highest rent increase was $25. $25 motherfucking dollars. I'll get back to this later. I say all that to say that I didn't feel hella fazed by the second round of unemployment. I was on slight edge, but hella grateful that I didn't have to tap into my savings account to pay rent. The third time on unemployment did not go as planned. That happened in October 2021. My contract wasn't renewed with a company that I couldn't stand. I also felt imposter syndrome galore and was mistreated by 2 specific managers in place. They literally added to the microaggression that Black people feel working in all white spaces. I talk about this experience of navigating white spaces heavy in episode 5. This last job triggered some PTSD yet again from my time in Miami. It's the gatekeepers who have no business gatekeeping. I couldn't see where unemployment would take me, so I did everything that I thought I wanted to do. I did some background acting work again for shits and giggles, gave that shit right back after being in the cold with no jacket on, acting like it was fall for the Netflix series now called Kaleidoscope, which was titled Jigsaw at the time. So when I applied for unemployment again, some shit had changed since I was last on it a year ago. This time, I was assigned a caseworker that was required to check in on me to make sure I remained qualified for unemployment benefits. Bitch, not the caseworker. I'm talking to the system. I paid into this. Give me all my coins. For the next few months, I would get assigned random calls with my caseworker named Jesus, aka Jesus, how convenient, to audit my job search records, something I never had to do before. I was applying to hella jobs and making some headway, or so I thought. I think my list of jobs I applied to was over 150. Landed some nice interviews, but my ego couldn't get over the fact that everything was under 6 figures. Needless to say, I was on unemployment a lot longer than I expected. At 37, I moved into my dream apartment for now, thanks to landing that emotionally draining job right on time to take advantage of the pandemic specials at the end of 2020. Only to be back at square one circa 2013 and closer to age 40. That did not sit well with me, and neither did my guest's unemployment status. Although her journey was different from mine, we both had one thing in common. We were in our late 30s figuring some new shit out again.
Yeah, you know what? I was in a state of shock for so long. So I'm like, I was wondering too about that. I was like, I wonder if I like went through the stages of grief, because it's a loss, it's like a death, right? So I was like thinking back about it. I'm like, I think I was still processing and just on survivor mode to even process that shit. Cause so it's like, that's something I'm going to talk about in therapy, which I now have. I now have a new therapist, thank goodness.
That's my guest, Tanja Stidham, aka Embrace the J. She and I met at the top of 2020 in LA through our mutually nomadish friend, Darnell Lamont Walker, who's now an Emmy-nominated TV writer, a filmmaker, and a friend of the podcast. He'll be on later in the season. I had been following Tanja on Twitter for some time and just connected with her instantly. It must have been the Leo in both of us. Back then, she was an entertainment writer for The Root, a digital magazine centering Black folks. But I'll let her introduce herself to the collective.
Yeah, so I'm Tanja. I am a writer, director, and producer. Namely comedy. That's my genre. That's my top genre in writing. And then I'm also a senior copywriter at XX Artists, where I pretty much write copy, for social media. Their clients are like YouTube, Google. Title is a new client. It's like really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part, Leos,
Yes.
okay? Eh. Leos are so obnoxious, and I don't
Ah,
care. We are so obnoxious when we
listen,
meet
y'all
another
love
Leo.
it.
Barack Obama is a Leo. I want everyone to be motherfucking clear. Our
Period.
president is a Leo,
Period.
okay? Um, so, as I was starting to navigate this season, I was like, man, I want to come back and it feel different, feel more intimate, feel more close to me than it has been. And the first thing I thought about was what we've all been navigating in our own way, and specifically for us in our late 30s, right? And so I know for me as a cis hetero, single Black woman, no children, pets, or plants, right?
Okay.
So I could really move. If I stick
To
and move,
freedom.
right?
Yes.
So life looks different for me than it does for some of my other girlfriends. And I remember we were going through the pandemic, and I know there's different things that everyone had to navigate. I remember though, when my contract did not get renewed at this company that I used to work for, I was happy to leave because they had cultivated like or exacerbated imposter syndrome for me. And it was just a super white corporate space. And then I also came to the conclusion, I was like, I am fucking unemployed for the third time in New York City. And I could not imagine. And so wanted to kind of talk through your story because, you know, first taking it back, right? You live
Mm,
in LA, I live in New York. What were you taught about your socializations on where you're supposed to be at what age and the career that you
mm.
were pursuing? Like, where did you start? And then how did you get to where you are now?
Wow, that's a great question. Cause yeah, like that's real, and I completely relate to you, right? Single, childless, all those things. The IRS hates me, but I love my life. But, so like, yeah, it's literally that. Like, it was in my 20s, I think, that I really had that pretty much chip on my shoulder about, oh, I want to do these things before 30. In fact, I had a goal. I want to be on a 30 under 30 list, like on Forbes, like all those lists. I would look at those lists like, oh my God, I'm inching closer to 30 and I haven't made the list. And then I realized like how it works in the background and things like that. It's not just about how talented you are, how great things you are, it's publicity, all those things, right?
Mm.
But you look at that with that imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh, I'm not on this list, so I must not be popping. Um, it probably was when I got into my mid 30s and now upper 30s. I am now is I don't give a fuck about any of that. Like it's like it doesn't have to happen at a certain age. In fact, I now know looking back, I wouldn't have been ready then. I wouldn't have been ready for all those things that I dreamed of and those goals and the way that I even look at them, how I see that people are being exploited, all those things, right? I now have like that outlook to handle these things better. I know that's going to come in the time that it's supposed to come. It's divine order, girl, divine order.
Listen, it's interesting because I didn't realize how I actually still don't know if you can enlighten us. How did those Forbes 30, not four, well, Forbes is one of them, but like
Yeah.
various platforms had the 30 under 30,
Yeah.
the 40 under 40. And it's just like, well, is there a 50 under 50? Because I just want to know.
Right.
Right. But like, but like people list this in their bios as
Yeah.
like this accolade. And so when you don't see that, like yourself being on these lists or not knowing how to get to these lists, like you
Hmm.
do start to do this compare and contrast. And so,
Hmm.
what was the smoke and mirrors behind those lists when you were just like, oh, double fuck it, like, oh, this is not even real
Right.
to a
Yeah.
certain extent.
It really is. It's like PR, right? Like when you're looking at it like from an outside perspective, you're like, oh, these are the most talented people in the world this year, right? Who are under 30. And you're thinking like, oh, I don't have that talent. But it really is majorly publicity. Like you have a publicist pushing these things out and it's,
Mm.
PR for that person. It's PR for either that brand that they're promoting or a movie they may be promoting or something like that. It's like probably 70% that and maybe 30% the other thing. It's like knowing the right people. It's having a Forbes contact, maybe, right? Like literally, I got a quote in Forbes because I knew somebody who wrote in Forbes. and that's it. Like they reached out to me because they knew that they knew me and they knew I wrote
Yeah.
about this specific thing that they were writing about. So all of that matters, and like I'm a huge proponent of that, right? Like I'm a huge proponent of not only like telling people your story and being inspirational, like I worked hard to do this and blah blah blah, not taking away from the hard work that you did, but I'm also a proponent of being honest, of being transparent, that these other factors also come into play, such as luck, such as being in the right place at the right time, such as knowing the right people. So I'm very,
Mm.
very transparent in that because it doesn't take away from the fact that you're working hard or that you're talented. But a lot of people take it as that, saying that it's not mutually exclusive, right? It's like all those other factors are true and important. And I wish more people would who are on these panels would be honest about those things because the people who are watching from the outside, they wouldn't feel as bad.
I like that you said that. I think the thing that I think about too is so I think the the social media version of that was like how it started versus how
Yes.
it's going, right? And so with your younger self, you being an entertainment journalist and the connections that you had, what did you imagine your 30s to look like?
Yeah, definitely didn't imagine to look like this. I didn't imagine getting into the entertainment space this way at all. Like I always knew I was going to be a writer in some way, and I had all these dreams of being various different writers. Right. Once I found out that they were jobs, obviously I landed on screenwriting when I found out that that was a job. I was like, oh
Mm.
shit! Like I watched the movie for me was E.T. and it made me cry at the end. And so like as I got older, I'm like, oh, I want to make someone have evoke emotion in this way, whether it's crying, laughing, being angry, what have you. And that's when I was like, oh, I want to be a screenwriter. This is what I want to do. So looking at my 30s, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be living in LA. I'm going to be writing films. I'm going to be directing films, all these things. And I had this idea of how you land that dream job, right? It's the things they tell you. It's like, oh, you go to LA and you get all these scripts and, you shop them around the studios and
Mm.
query letters and all these things. And obviously, as I gotten older, the entertainment industry has changed in a lot of ways. It's not like that old school way of like pitching yourself anymore. And definitely, digital has a lot of impact on it as well, and like how people have gotten jobs, which is great, I think, because it's like it takes away like that gatekeeping aspect of it, because it's like so much harder to like in person be like, hey, I know this producer who can buy my script, or I know this network who can distribute it. Whereas like that network or that producer can see how funny you are on Twitter, or see that you writing some cool tweets or whatever, and then you end up in a fucking TV writer's room like because of your tweets or because of your blog or because of your TikTok, right? That's happening now. So yeah, so like when I got into the entertainment journalism space, I never would have thought I would get into that industry specifically through there. And it's because of my writing though. Once I look back, it all makes sense. It's because I was an online blogger. Like I took my passion for writing and entered the blogging space, and it led me to getting a real professional job in entertainment journalism, which is really cool.
Mhm, and speaking of social media, I know that's been a way for a lot of us to connect with new people, rally around content in a different way. I also learned probably wasn't the best place to share personal business anymore. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I used to oh gosh, I had to archive a lot of my Instagram content. What's your relationship with social media now in your 30s?
From when I first started, basically.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm obviously still myself, right? Because I always want to be authentic, but I am more mindful when I'm representing a company that I work at, right?
mhm.
I still like, we'll post some unhinged tweets or whatever, but I'm not gonna post every single thing that I'm thinking, obviously, because I'm still mindful that my account is attached to my real name. Just how you mentioned at the top of the show, embrace the J. Like that was my name for a while. Even before that, it was like pinch my cheeky because I didn't even use my real name in a digital space. And my name was Cheeky. Everybody knew me as Cheeky because of the cheeks. Both of them, both sets. And so like that was my name. And then I did embrace the J. I did that spin on my name when I was like transitioning into using my real name and bylines and stuff like that. And then I was like, no, I gotta have my at name as my real name because I'm using my name is my currency now. And so like once I transitioned to
Mm.
that, like the stuff, I was more mindful of what I was posting for sure.
The name being currency. I mean, I was telling people like we're all talking about the demise of Twitter and we're just all watching it slowly burn as of
Yeah.
November 2022. But I know there have been points where I just wanted to like like hit a tweet that could have potentially been viral, hit an opinion that could be, you just want to express certain things. And I would find myself now, Tanja, just deleting shit because I'm just
Mhm.
like, you don't, who cares? Like,
Right.
does it really fucking matter if you post this thought that you
Mm.
have
Mhm.
in this website? And I'm just curious if like you've struggled or navigated as you
Mhm.
started getting older and really recognizing the brass behind your name, the currency behind your name.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's both. I think it's twofold, right? It's like thinking about the professional stuff and then also the personal stuff, right? Because Twitter, especially like as it has evolved from like the older days when you're really just like throwing thoughts at the ether and everybody was just like it was pretty much unhinged and like lawless land. Like now you really have to like be mindful of what you say because of your platform or people are going to drag you. No one wants to be the main character of the day at Twitter, but it happens. Whatever. Once you have a platform, is bound to happen at one point. But it's also personal. I'm protecting my personal peace, right? Like sometimes I'll be like, I'll see a debate going on Twitter, and I love a good debate. I love a good like back and forth. I love a good banter. But sometimes I'll be looking at shit like, you know what? The people who are involved in this are miserable. I'm just gonna not participate,
Yeah, no, oh
right? Just
yeah,
to
no, I
protect my
know.
peace. I'm like, well, I don't need to throw my thoughts in this because I don't want to be like in my ats all day, in my mentions all day, arguing about this thing that's very, is pretty much not even like that important.
As we are navigating this journey that we're on, life sometimes has a way of interrupting the vision we have for ourselves.
Mm.
Tell me a time where you literally had a what the fuck just happened moment
Oh,
that basically changed like the trajectory of what you thought you were going to be doing personally and professionally.
I would say when I got laid off from Tonal, that was the first time I ever got laid off from a job ever in my life. In my professional career, I've experienced layoffs like at a company, right? And I, was the person left behind and had that like survivor's remorse and all that. So I know all about that feeling
Mm.
because literally like mass layoffs and I still was there, right? Even people that I knew, like my sister, like we worked at the same law firm. She got laid off and I was still there for like years after, but I had never
Mhm.
gotten laid off. And it was a what the fuck moment because it wasn't necessarily that I didn't think it was like I was like Teflon. I knew I was in the tech space. I knew that happens. But I was a newbie in the tech space, right? It was like I didn't really know what the tech space was. I really was learning. I
Mhm.
was green, even though I was in the content department and doing script writing for the content, it still is a tech company. And so I learned like in a startup at that. And so as I was like learning about that, I was like, okay, this is how they maneuver. It's very different from a very legacy corporate world. Absolutely different. Like their culture is completely different. It's always like, oh, if you have an idea, let me know. Like the CEO founder is saying this, whereas you're at a legacy corporate, it's like, no, we do things this fucking way, and this is the way you're gonna do it. But yeah, when I was laid off, it was like, oh shit, because also it was the most money I've ever made in my life. So I was really cushy, really comfortable, making it rain in some ways as well. But it was a what the fuck moment, but it wasn't even just like the part of being laid off. It was also like how much I learned about my worth. Because after that, now I can't go too much lower than that. Now I know how to demand for more and what I deserve. But yeah, that was definitely like a oh shit, because it was like I was there less than a year. It was probably almost a year.
Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
name of the company again?
Tonal, Tonal.
Tono, yes.
Yeah, home digital gym system.
I remember that because it was public, right? So what I've been seeing people that like what's been happening is it will come out in an article and
Right.
some people will, retweet it and mention publicly that they were affected by it or they're kind of keep
Yes.
quiet. And you took the road of just letting people know
Mhm.
that you were part of what happened to Tono, made you be so vulnerable. Social media is just unkind at times.
It
Like what led you to being that vulnerable around that life interrupted moment?
It's probably just the consistency of how I am on social media in general, right? I'm a storyteller at heart, and that also means about my life. Obviously, that doesn't mean tell everybody about my business, right? I have boundaries.
Mhm.
I definitely have boundaries, but I've always led for lack of a better word, brand of being transparent about my life and my journey. So everybody followed my journey from even when I was moving to LA. Like I had a GoFundMe to raise money to move to LA and all the various careers that I had after that. Like when I was writing for Blavity, then writing for The Root, and then getting this job at Tonal. So even when I announced my job at Tonal, I was pretty like well known at that point from the Roots because they elevated my platform like on another level. And so I was like, hey y'all, like guess what? Y'all not gonna see my bylines on. I literally wrote an article on the Root about my exit, right? And like I was like, stay tuned. I'm gonna tell you where I'm going next, and it's a plot twist, which it was, because I just saw this job on LinkedIn, and I was like, okay, script writer, because I wanted to do like more writing
Yeah.
scripts and stuff. And so I was like, I don't know what tonal is. I thought it was title at first when I saw it. I was like, oh, cool,
How
JC.
black is that? Like, ooh, child, I thought this was title.
Right? I'm like, okay, JC. But it was not. And then like once I learned more about the company and like the production and how they produce things, I was like, oh cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get to be on set and all that shit. But yeah, so I announced that. Like it was all on my content, like on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of it. I posted all of that I was getting a job at Tonal. And so like I think what so that inspired me, but then also too seeing and supporting other people who were getting laid off during that time as well. Like my peers, especially when I was in digital media, when I was in editorial space, I saw that happening all the time with my peers, and they would share, right? So like I would see it all on my timeline all the time. And like you said, it is that risk of like people being nasty and assholes, which does happen. But for the most part, as far as like what I saw on my timeline, it was so supportive, and all the editors are like, yo, if you need, some freelance work, email me here. If you need this work. And the tech space was kind of the same way. And I saw it happening with Twitter. Like when Twitter had that mass layoff, it's a bunch of people in the tech space, people at Google, people at Meta, and they're laying off people too, actually. But like, like in that space, people were like, let's help each other. And Tonal was
Yeah.
the same way, and the tech community was the same way with Tonal, where like people in tech had like literally a spreadsheet of like, okay, put your name, put your email, put your specialty, so we can send this list to potential recruiters and so forth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was great.
Wow. You handled it a lot better than I did because my life interrupted. I think it was just there's a multitude of moments like WTF moments.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt louder because of the age that I was at, and I had felt
Mm,
immediately like a failure again.
mm-hmm.
I could not get out of my head. Tanja handled it a lot better than I did. All I could think about was I was unemployed for the third time in New York, and I was much older than the first time it happened. I felt like a failure. Yes, I was happy to leave that fucking job, and I just knew I was going to get something fly when my contract ended October 1st, 2021. But my arrogance or confidence was on 1,000. Then November hits, and then December hits, and now it's January 2022. Still nothing. I had landed some pretty dope interviews, but I wasn't reading the room. Let's just name them: HBO Max, 3 rounds of interviews and a writing test with ABC Radio, and Amazon. I was stuck on the money piece. I had made 6 figures and thought I should be paid 6 figures despite the position not calling for it. I was unemployed until my benefits ran out, and I allowed that to deflate my confidence. I was also too prideful to ask for help until it got really tough. Being unemployed for almost a year, to say that I experienced some peaks and valleys, is an understatement.
Yeah, that's real. And you know what? You mentioned in a part about like that arrogance of like, oh yeah, I got it. You know what? I had a little bit of that, and it wasn't like the unemployment running out because oh my God, that would have been. I can't even imagine like how I would survive that. But I even got a little scared when my severance was about to run out, right? Because
Mm.
like unemployment like ain't shit like compared to like when you're used to living a certain way, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, calculating because I applied like right away. I applied for unemployment immediately, right? And like I know like California is like their system isn't it doesn't take really that long. But I just wanted to know like okay to budget like far ahead in advance. So I'm like, okay, how
Mm-hmm.
much are they going to be giving me every week? And then when I saw it, I was like, oh shit, I can't barely survive on this. Like
Okay.
not just
Huh.
enjoy my life, but I can't survive. So I was like, oh fuck. So yeah, again, so like when I announced that like I had gotten laid off, again, it was this outpouring of support and community, and the people that I had networked with, they were like, "Oh yeah, girl, I'll shoot you a referral." And that was the thing I was arrogant about. I was like, "Oh yeah, I got referrals. I'm gonna get something. I'm gonna get a whole bunch of interviews. Blah blah blah." What I didn't think about is like, "Oh no, it's a looming recession, if not one already." A referral didn't fucking matter. First of all, like it's like 50, 11 other people probably got a referral too. They know people too, and it's just like a different job environment. It's a different job industry market. And these companies that I was trying to apply to was a lot of like studios and some tech spaces. I even applied at Meta, I applied at Hulu, I applied at Disney, Amazon, all those like big
Mm-hmm.
studios. and they were going through it too. That's why they probably weren't looming on a hiring freeze, if not layoffs. And so
Yeah.
like that's why I didn't get that context when I was like thinking about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a job somewhere else because I know all these people in these like really high places. And like it's not even that I like looked at it like I know for sure I'm going to get a job, because they gave me a referral. I wasn't that naive or that green. I just thought I was gonna at least go get a recruiter interview or something. I didn't even get that. And so I was like, oh
Something.
shit, I gotta humble myself. And I just started applying like everywhere. Like every single
Yeah.
day I set some time to apply to. I can't even count how many places I applied to. And this job
Oh
at
yeah.
XX Artists is I didn't know anybody there. I just applied and
And it
that
just
was
went
the
in.
furthest I got from
It was
anything.
exhausting.
Yeah, right? It's so
Listen,
exhausting.
it was
Oh my God.
exhausting. I had to keep a work search record. Out of all the times I've been on unemployment,
Yes.
this was the first time they assigned me a caseworker, and the man's name was
Whoa.
Jesus. I said, "Jesus, so you coming for me too on this side
Literally.
of the plate?" His name was Jesus. I
Not
said, "You," I
Jesus.
said, "God,
Okay.
you
You
got too
play too
many
much.
jokes for me." Yes,
Mhm.
and I literally, it's funny. After I was done with unemployment, I actually still kept updating the work search record. Like I was just programmed.
Wow.
So to
Yeah.
your point, I literally have a laundry list of jobs I applied
Yes, I
to.
got a whole folder. I'm like, I keep it
Oh my
all
gosh.
those records.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it was so funny. What feelings did you have to contend with? It didn't, like, were you did you navigate okay
You know what?
when you were on unemployment?
Yeah, you know what? I was in a state of shock for so long. So I'm like, I was wondering too about that. I was like, I wonder if I like went through the stages of grief, because it's a loss, it's like a death,
Mm.
right? So I was like thinking back about it. I'm like, I think I was still processing and just on survivor mode to even process that shit. Cause so it's like that's something I'm gonna talk about in therapy, which I now have. I now have a new therapist, thank goodness. For the work perk, we get therapy from BetterHelp, which is great. So yeah, like I could talk to through that. So I'm like, I think I was like so overwhelmed in the feelings of everybody being willing to help without me having to even ask, right? I just said, hey, I'm laid off, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people were in my comments and my DMs like, oh, yeah, girl, we got you, blah, blah, blah. Could put in a referral for you. So I was still processing that gratitude. And then like with the severance, I was feeling pretty like, oh well shit, I could just coast for like a couple of months, 3 months with just getting the same paycheck that I that I do get when I'm working. I could just have like a
Yeah.
3 month like sabbatical pretty much or vacation. So that was the initial feelings. Then obviously as it got closer to like, okay, this is the last severance, check or whatever, I started getting worried. I started getting some anxiety. There were definitely some feelings of doubt for sure. It's like, oh shit, if I don't get a job by this time, because I had some things planned. I had like trips planned. I have like a wedding for a friend. It's a destination wedding that I was going to. So it's like I had all these expenses that I was starting to worry about. And then like I was like, oh shit, my savings are about to dwindle. Like all these things that I had like backed up. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna be in that spot again. And I was like pretty much scared of being in that spot where I was when I was a full time freelancer for the first time. Like that was the
Ugh,
hardest financial environment I ever been in my life. It was so hard. Like I'm still recovering from that, trying to get my credit back to what it was. Like my credit
wow.
was excellent. It went to poor. Like to be
Oh
totally
my
transparent.
gosh.
Yes. And
Wow.
so I'm
Wow.
still recovering from that even. Right.
Yeah. It's funny the things that I would get so hung up on, and you just never know what people are navigating, right? Like, you think you're the
Hmm.
only one in this space, and I'm just like, "Shit," like, I'm thinking about all the credit card debt that has accumulated over the
Oh,
years, and I started choosing to feel bad, and I think a lot of times we just don't give ourselves grace, and I think even as Black women, there's just so much put on us to
oh,
live a certain way, be a certain way, be a certain thing, and
yeah.
all things to different people at the same time, and sometimes the shit is fucking exhausting. And
Oh,
when you are tired, when you are sick and tired and you just don't have it in you, like what do you do? Like what helps you keep going?
mm. You know what? The first thing I thought of was Zumba, girl. Like, if you follow me on Instagram, I always post like for my Zumba class. My Zumba teacher, he always does like this thing called the power thought of the day, and it's like an inspirational quote. And then he
Mm.
says something that's like very inspirational. He says like this thing that he says every class that he all to put out good vibes into the group as we leave our class, as we go towards our cool down, basically. But Zumba has been like that's the natural endorphins. I'm like so that's like my healthy thing, right? And I meditate. I meditate every morning before I wake up, before I check my phone, before I do anything. I meditate. I mean, I got to check my phone for the app. to the timer. I use Insight Timer for meditation. And so like I do that. I go right to the app and meditate for 10 minutes before I do anything in the morning. But yeah, other than that, like the unhealthy shit is like eating junk food, drinking like all these things. I'm like, let me give me a glass of wine, all these things. That's like not good
Yes.
for you and if it's not done in moderation, I'll say.
Yeah.
But
Fair
like,
enough.
so like, I have some like toxic habits. I have some healthy habits as well. It's all in the balance, definitely too. I would say as far as like content is watching content, I love reality shows, like the trashiest shows. That like helps me because I think like when I was an entertainment journalist, even though I love like analyzing movies, I love analyzing TV and
Yeah.
critiquing those things, it became so exhausting and so hard, and it became work and it became a chore for me that I got tired of watching like TV shows and movies. Like for a period of
Mm,
time, I wasn't watching shit but like reality TV. And I just want some mindless, that I don't have to think about because my brain is going to
yeah.
be like already turned on that switch. Like analyze it, like critique it. Like it's natural
Yeah.
at this point, innate.
Yeah. Similar to Tanja, I was in straight escapism mode around the time we recorded this interview in November 2022. I was craving shows that centered Black people and especially Black women. Reasonable Doubt on Hulu was out at the time featuring Emayatsi Cornaldi. Atlanta was in its last season. I just craved scripted shows because they were inspiration for me to know my dream would soon be realized as well. I also revisited my go-to comfort shows like Living Single, The Golden Girls, laying eyes on the Golden Palace for the first time. I leaned into a lot of music and Tara Brock's meditation podcast, which is still my jam. The healthy coping mechanisms were a must. Who is your favorite TV character that you feel like you embody in this season of your life and why?
Oof. I would say what's funny is I would say Freddie from a different world. It's like because she was like so
That's Cree Summer, right?
that's Cree
Cree Summer's
Summer,
character?
yes, the
Okay.
goat, the voice goat, the voiceover goat. Yeah, I would say because she's so like it's the scatterbrainness for me is what I really related to with Freddie. Is because like especially growing up, I like thought like that I was weird, that I was different, like from a lot of people, right? I was always in my head about it. But I wasn't
Mm,
as brave as her to express myself that way, right? Until I became like into the writer space, the online space, and then I got to be my goofy self. So I love a goofy girl, and she is a goofy girl. I'm goofy. I love goofy men. Like call me. Like I love it. It's like that's my love language. It's being goofy. So like I would say her for sure.
there's so many if I was to take like there's so many characters back in 90s sitcom era.
Yeah.
The one that I've been really holding on to in this season in my life at in my late 30s has been Emma Yahtzee's character as Jack Stewart on Reasonable Doubt on Hulu.
Yes.
And for a few reasons. There's I'm not married. I don't have any children as of yet.
Hmm.
There's this way that Jax gets seeing her get to breathe in a way that Black women don't often get to
Mm,
breathe
so
on
important.
a TV show, and the nuances of her being this sexual being, this badass lawyer that is
Yes.
just trying to balance it all and is struggling balancing it all while also not giving herself grace or extending that level of grace to her
Right.
friends.
Hmm.
There have been pockets of moments where I have felt like I was Jax or I saw a lot of myself in Jax,
Mm.
uh, that I'm not gonna share with the audience, but there was
Right.
just things where I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, I've seen that evolution of me," and so to see her, it was almost like I would aspire to wanna to be and present in a way where, yes, you have your shit together, but, like, I'm also navigating some shit too,
That's
you
it.
know?
Well, that's life. That's real life, right? And we live in that space, right? It's like a roller coaster. It's like not always good, not always bad. And that's okay because we are human, right?
It
It's like,
is.
how you go through those seasons like, oh my God, I am killing this shit. Like it's great. And then it's like a really low low. And I'm like, oh God, I'm the worst ever. I'm a hack. All these things these bad things you tell yourself. But then like you realize it's like it's always gonna be like those up and downs and just being prepared for that and it being okay. that there are those up and downs. It's like it doesn't define you, like who you are, you're not, or your worth, right?
Mm.
And it's easier said than done, right? Because I'm like, you tell the,
Mhm.
it's kind of the same thing, right? With her, it's like how you're like you're pretty much hypocritical with yourself, your self talk than you are with your friends. And that's why it's like that meme, like, speak to yourself the way you speak to your friends, or you want someone to speak to your friends. Like somebody say something to your best friend, you'll kick their ass if you say the shit that you say to yourself to them. like,
Yeah,
I
there was one episode, and I meant to tweet it, but she just was not patient with her friend that was dealing with the
yeah,
basketball player, and I
yep,
was like, because she doesn't have that level of patience for herself.
projecting, yes,
She
totally
was
projecting,
projecting.
yeah,
And I was like, how many times do we do that? But like again, sometimes the world is just not necessarily kind and black women we're always juggling so much because
we
we're
are,
considered at the bottom of the totem pole, right?
yeah,
White men, white women, black women. And I'll have
yep,
black men try to argue with me. And I'm just like, you make more on the dollar than I
right,
do. You're rarely worried about being sexually assaulted.
exactly,
And, and
hmm
you still get to benefit from patriarchy.
exactly.
And so that girl, that's a whole other conversation. So
Oh,
when I say like being a black woman, the race and the gender we're constantly at toe with. And
mm,
I love how Jax, she really navigates it in a way that we're like, shit, yep, that's exactly what we have to deal with. Like white men
right,
telling you you shouldn't be doing or what you can't do or
yep,
second guessing you or assuming. And she's standing in it like, no, bitch, I know what the
okay,
fuck I'm
okay,
back the fuck up. Right. And so just wanting to be in a space where you're that sovereign as Jax is showing herself to be in
yes,
various areas of her life. So
absolutely, yes,
yeah.
amen.
Okay. Ashe. What would have been the title of your story before your life interrupted moment?
I would say everything is everything. That's something that my mom is always saying.
Mm.
Like she just says, everything's everything. It's kind of like a just like to it's just like a phrase just to say like, you know what? This is life. Like it's just saying just accepting the highs and the lows, kind of like what I was saying about comparing, to being a black woman and like giving yourself grace. That's what it would be my title before the life
Now, what would
interrupted
the
moment.
title be after that life interrupted moment that you shared with us?
Oops, pal surprise would be. Because like it was like I was like in this like state of like zen before that, right? I was like, oh shit, again, like I'm making like so much money, because like that was a problem in the digital journalism space, was getting paid
Yeah.
what I was worth. And so I was like, oh shit, the techies, oh, they be making it rain on a girl. So like, I was like, I got to enjoy my life more, enjoy, and not worry so much about bills and stuff. So I was like in this very zen space, and it was like I was not only making more money, I was working less. Like I was working less hours. I was less exhausted, less tired. I was like more healthy than I ever had been, in a few years because of, not being overworked and exhausted and all that stuff. So when that was snatched away from me, girl, snatching my wig, the recession pretty much snatching my wig from me. I was like, oh shit, like just keep me on my toes, Jesus. Okay, I see you. Like you got jokes, like he said. I'm like, wow. And so like, but like all of it is a learning, experience. I know I'm gonna learn something from it. I don't know what that lesson is yet, but I know it's gonna be something. It's gonna pretty much, carry me on to my next chapter, right? Chapter. I had to have that happen for me to be ready for whatever's coming next.
So everything is everything before your life interrupted moment. That's in the
Yeah.
chapter. After it's oot shit chop. What was it?
Oops, pal surprise.
Oh right, oops. Yes, when you used to
It's fucking KO. Like it's like
I
Tekken.
think about those old Batman TV shows
Yeah.
where it's like, and then you follow the
Yes.
letters. That
Holy
makes so much
recession
sense.
Batman. That was it.
Ah, that's so funny because now even visualizing it is making, oh my gosh, my eyes are watering. Tanja, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna put this in the show notes, but tell the good people where they can find you, all that jazz.
So on social media, I'm at Tanja Stidham. It's TonjaStidhum. That's the first and last name. So that's Twitter, Instagram. You can find me Facebook, LinkedIn, all those things. But you can also find me in my work at my website is Tanja Renee Stidham. So it's my first, middle, and last name.com.
Tanja.
Yes. It's like Oprah singing your name. That's how I feel right now. Georgette. It's like,
I know. Oh, right. Like she.
It's
Yes, I know. That's hilarious. That's so hilarious. Oh my gosh! Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love you. Like you have that. You're like that one name person, right? It's just Georgette, right? It's like that's how I know you're a star when you could just go by the one name.
Oh my gosh! You know what's so funny? I was in the bank at Chase one time. This woman was like, because I needed to get something notarized. She was like, "You have such a name presence." I was like, "Oh."
She ain't lying.
I was like, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah." Do you? And I told her I was like, "Well, I do voice acting, and then blah blah blah." And she was like, "Yeah, Georgette Pierre." And I was like. Right? I mean, it does have a ring to it, but like right, like wave to the people, like, one finger at a time.
Like,
oh gosh, yes. Waving to the good people. I still can't believe I was unemployed for almost a year, and yet I was covered. Seriously, thank you, God, for those unexpected voiceover checks that carried me through because this New York rent, baby, scandalous. Especially in this so-called dream apartment that I'm in right now. But I am still here. Thank you, God. I loved how honest Tanja was about her journey and about sharing it on social media. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to do everything on my own so I didn't have to depend on anyone. Boy, was I wrong. Her asking for help allowed people to show up for her. When I finally decided to check in with my former colleague and let him know I was looking for work, he told me about the job on his team that I'm currently working in now. Had I allowed my stubborn ways back yonder to get in the way, I'm sure this episode would have sounded differently or this season would have never existed. I'm not sure where you are on your journey of asking for help, but I'm gradually making more intentional requests to allow the things I need to make their way to me. In short, let your collective in. And on that note, until the next episode, peace. This podcast was written and hosted by me, Georgette Pierre, associate producer Tristan Bragg, and co-producer and editor Wise Grisette for the Indie Creative Network. Music by Otis McDonald, King Canyon, and Bale Bonds. You can follow my conversations on Twitter at Georgette and Instagram at Georgette Pierre. That's GeorgettePierre. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Black Nuance Pod. That's Black, NUANCEDPOD, or email us at blacknuancepod@gmail.com, spelled the same exact way. Subscribe and share from your favorite podcast app. We're streaming on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more. Thanks for listening.